Right, so this will be episode 2 of the 10-6 diary series. So we'll start off with the first session here. This was the first session of the year. I think this was on like the 4th or 5th of January. It was on like the first Wednesday in January. And what sort of happened up to this point was John hadn't really updated my training program because essentially I hadn't told him I was competing. So then we had to like really change up and overhaul a lot of things. So this sort of means that the off season in 2023 will hopefully be planned a lot better because I'll actually try and communicate to him, because it's sort of like, you know, it's mostly my fault because I'm not sort of communicating sort of the, I guess, like the plans well enough. So this year, you know, hopefully I'm going to get better at doing that, and I'm going to try and get like monthly calls with him in, because I've not really been using that service as much. But yeah, enough of that. So I ran the first session, and then the day after that I ran some 20s because I sort of had like 4/5 days of not really running, and I wanted to just kind of like, I didn't want to like peak too soon for my first meet. That's kind of like a common theme for me. I'm always sort of like scared that I'm going to like peak too soon by taking too much off, and it oftentimes gets me in a lot of bother. But yeah, ran my first meet, went 7.04, then 7.01 in the second race. So that meet, the day before I did like a little shakeout session, and then I went to work. I think I worked like a 7-hour shift maybe, something like that, and then I drove down to Birmingham. It was a nice uneventful drive. I think it took like 3.5 hours to get down there. Stayed in my dad's flat overnight, and then got the train I think at like 7 in the morning down to London, because that's where I was competing. And then had to get like the tube. I think I had to get like 2 or 3 different tubes. I got on the wrong tube at one point because I just have no idea. I'm like so bad at travelling, honestly. But got on the wrong tube, but I eventually found my way to sort of the right place. And then I was supposed to get a bus in, but I was like waiting like 45 minutes for this bus, and it just wasn't turning up, and I was like unsure as to where to get the bus, so I just ended up getting an Uber in the end. And my plan was to be there like 2 hours before the meet, because I like to get there like 2-3 hours early, just to sort of acclimatise and get used to sort of where I'm going to be running. But yeah, I wasn't able to do that because the bus just didn't turn up. So I just got an Uber, and then I had like an hour and a bit to warm up, and I had to warm up outside as well. There wasn't like a warm-up track anywhere, so it was like raining, and it was like 4 degrees out, so it was really cold, and I got like soaked out in the rain. So I think my shorts were like wet for the first run, so if they weren't wet I definitely would have ran like a 6.6, but it is what it is. I'll just have to do that next time. But no, so yeah, I was really happy to like open up with the 7.01, and I was hoping to sort of build on that at the next meet. So I ran then down in Sheffield, so I did all this sort of like training in between time. So everything you see in this video is sort of like what I did on the days. This is like most of the footage I have. I think I've like missed out a few things where I've done like, you know, other accessory lifts like Romanian deadlifts, but this is like most of the sort of like training, and I think basically all of the sprints bar maybe like a few sessions. But yeah, this was the week of Sheffield, so I ran this like 50 meter rep max effort. Technique was looking nice, but I just didn't really feel like I had that like pop in my step. I feel like, so one thing I've sort of like been like really looking at since I've been, you know, I got injured. I'll just kind of like get to that now. I did get injured, but one thing I've been like looking at since I've been injured is sort of like figuring out the type of athlete that I actually am. So I know that I get a really good adrenaline response, so when I'm racing I'm able just to kind of like overclock my system and go like, you know, a tenth faster with max velocity, sometimes even up to like a tenth and a half quicker than what I would get in training. So with that in mind, it's probably something that I need to be a lot more wary of like post meet. I need to kind of maybe do more kind of recovery type cycles and just take it a lot easier. But like my sort of thing against it is I don't want to, again, sort of like peak at the wrong time and then just like ruin my season. So it's sort of like a kind of like constant battle, but it's definitely something I should try and take into account, and it's something that I'm, you know, hopefully going forward going to kind of implement into my training a bit. So this was the Sheffield meet that you just saw there. I ran 7.04 for the first race, and it was the only race as well. And again, I think I got the train down to Birmingham this time so I could do some work on the train, and then I got the train to Sheffield in the morning. It was like I think a 2-hour train journey maybe. And then, went and competed. It was supposed to be 2 races, and I was kind of like mad that it wasn't 2 races, because that's what I like paid for, but it is what it is. At least I got 1 race. One thing I'll sort of note is, this is something really interesting for me personally, is that just doing the 1 race, I was like really fresh after that, so I was able to just kind of like get straight back into training, and I didn't feel like I'd lost like too much from running just like the 1 race. So it's definitely something I could kind of like look to do, because I think, so I'd ran that 1 race on the Saturday, and then Thursday session is what you're seeing here, where I ran my fastest 60 metre. So I often find when I do run like 2 races, like say it's 2 100s or 2 60s, that I will feel sort of like fried for the next like week or so in training. Like my training times will be like way down, my numbers in the gym might be down as well even. I'll just sort of be like centrally just like, like fatigued. But after doing this like 1 race on the Saturday, I felt like a lot better. So it's possibly like a method that I could maybe employ, where it's like I run just like a single 100, like 10 days out in a meet, and then go and compete after the 10 days have elapsed, and I'll like maybe run really well. So it's something I might have to try and experiment with this season once I'm back healthy. But I'm gonna now talk about sort of the next meet. So it was the Scottish Championships, which was, I think like I was like maybe 1 week out from this session, so this was the Saturday, and I messed the tape up really bad for the Scottish Championships. So last time for the Scottish Outdoors, I ran, I ran like a 2.5 week taper, which was it just did not work at all. I kind of like rested too much, so this time I sprinted way too much. So I worked out over the course of 9 days. I had 6 sprint sessions. That's including the competition, which was the 6th sprint session on the 9th day. And these sessions were also of like varying intensity, so not all of them were like max effort. But even so, like it takes it out of you, it takes it out of your legs. And I just sort of like, I didn't realise it, so I'd sort of just been viewing training as like a week to week thing, instead of like viewing it more fluidly. And I was like training a lot more fluidly, and when I say fluidly, what I mean is like I'm not really training in like a 7-day cycle, like Monday to Sunday. I'm sort of like adjusting it to run on a Thursday instead of like usually running on the Wednesday, and just making these like small adjustments so that I kind of feel more fresh. And that sort of like shot me in the foot, because I wasn't looking at it as like how many sprint sessions have I done over the course of like 10 days. So that happened, and ran at the Scottish, and I was not feeling great. Like the numbers in training were not looking good in the week running up to the Scottish Championships, and I'm kind of surprised I ran sort of like as well as I did, and I was like not really far off finishing 3rd after kind of doing like all this sprinting. But yeah, it's like a big like learning, so like all like a massive like learning curve for me, because obviously like I've not really done competitive sports in like a long time, so it's like I'm just like learning a lot like every time, and each time I sort of like learn something, I'm sort of able to be stronger for future like future competitions, future championships. That's sort of like a big thing. So at the Scottish Championships I ran 7.04, but in the first heat I went, I think it was 7.11, and I was like, I think 0.19 up on the next fastest. It might not have been that, it might have been like 0.15 or maybe it was like 0.13 up on the next guy. That doesn't really matter too much, but I was like up on the next guy. It was nice and easy, but I just didn't really feel great. And as I said, the training numbers weren't looking great. Like in the week running up to it, I was struggling to power clean 95 kilos, which I've been doing since 2021. So I just wasn't feeling like great in general. And then about 20 minutes after the race, I was just sort of like standing around with my friend, and my hamstring just started to develop this sort of like tightness. And realistically, what I should have done was just say, right, we're gonna call it a day, call it quits, and we're not gonna run any more races because my hamstring is tight. But I had like my mum and my sister and another friend that was coming to watch, so I was just kind of like conscious of that, and I didn't want to sort of like let them down. But long story short, I'm never going to have that sort of mentality again. I'm definitely going to drop out if I ever get any kind of tightness, like, ever again. But yeah, I managed to kind of like make my way into the semi-finals, and I could feel the tightness when running in the semi-finals, and then, you know, the same again in the finals, but I managed to run 7.04, so I still sort of did reasonably well. But yeah, my hamstring was then like really tight after that, after running like 3 races, and like even the next day it was tight. And then Monday got to training, just did some easy hills, just something to sort of like stimulate a little bit. And then after doing the hills, still kind of feeling tight, I adjusted the weight room stuff to try and kind of not aggravate the hamstring as much, and then was feeling a lot better. By the Wednesday there was kind of like no pain, so I was like, right, let's go to the Emirates, let's go and try and run some, you know, 20-meter flies. So I ran, I think it was 4 reps in total, with 1 warm-up rep in trainers, and then the other 3 reps were in spikes with, I think it was like 2.1 seconds, 2.04, then 1.99. Technique was looking really nice in this session. I've got like a nice side angle of that as well that I think I'll maybe throw in this video. But yeah, I was like feeling really good. So then it got to the Friday, the day before the meet, and I thought I didn't want to kind of go really hard with another shakeout session doing like some horizontal running. So didn't do any horizontal running, just did some like pogos, some jumps, kept it nice and light. Didn't really, you know, as I say, didn't want to kind of do anything too drastic after having the hamstring pain or tightness last week. So I thought, you know, I'm good to go, I'm feeling good, the hamstring's not feeling tight, which is the main thing. So I get to competing on the Saturday. I rock up, I think like a few hours early, getting warmed up, feeling good, run the first race. I think it was like a 7:11 again, but it was like a really nice and easy 7:11. I think halfway through the race I kind of like looked at the time and I just sort of like knew that I was like, you know, like ahead of the like field behind me, and I think that was the race. I ran 7:11 and the next guy was like 7.3, so I had sort of a good like 2 meters on him. I was feeling good, feeling confident for the semi-final. Got into the semi-final, ran 7.06. Again, I think it was at least 0.1 seconds up on the next guy. And the guy that finished second in my semi-final finished third in the final. So, you know, definitely if I'd finished the final, maybe I could have, you know, done something special, but I'll kind of get to that in a second. But I ran 7.06, like, easing up before the line. Like I think like 2 steps out, I sort of just kind of like shut it down because I was like ahead of the field and I kind of knew that I'd had it like on lock. And yeah, just kind of like feeling really good. So I just kind of, you know, wanted to kind of didn't want to like get in my head and get like overly confident of like I'm feeling really good, but I felt like ready to run in the final. Get to the final, do like a warm-up, hamstrings feeling good, there's no sort of like signs of any like injury occurring or anything like that, and then, you know, we're lining up, feeling really good. I'm feeling like so locked in at this point. I'm feeling like, you know, it's like the best sort of like feeling I've had before a race, like ever. Back into the blocks, the gun goes off, and I get out, you know, the best I ever had. You know, it just, like, I was like in like such a flow state, and then like 15 meters in, I just feel my hamstring go. At that point I'm kind of just like slowing down. Still ended up running, I think it was like 2:92 to the 20 meters, but yeah, injury occurred, and I've like learned a lot from the injury, taken a lot away, which I think is the main thing. It's always about sort of like learning and what you can learn from something. So it was really sad to end the season early, but you know, I've got to kind of take away the positives of that. I've like learned stuff from this injury. Each time I've been injured, I've sort of like taken something away from it. It is something I want to do some more videos on, hopefully in the future, but you know, for now we're just going to kind of like do this series, and I'll maybe try and drop some more videos on sort of some of the pitfalls I've had as a, you know, a sprinter getting into it, and especially being a sprinter that's getting into it without having like an in-person coach to sort of like guide me more. So yeah, I think that's really been it for this one. So the next episode will be just sort of like the bridge between indoors and outdoors.